It's really fun to see the pattern grow. I'm calling them my spooky socks because they are Halloween themed. Thank you Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform where creatives can stand out with their online presence. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, Knee Knits. My name is Amy and here I talk about all things knitting, and today is podcast episode number 45 where I'll be sharing what I've been knitting for the past few weeks. In today's episode I have a finished object to share, which includes what I'm wearing today. I have updates on my fall projects, lots of sweaters on the needles, and I've casted on a few projects as well. Before we get into all of the projects, I want to take a few moments to thank the sponsor of today's video, Squarespace. Squarespace is a platform where you can build your online presence from the ground up. With the Squarespace website, you have lots of options for features like selling courses or digital and physical products. You can also post blog articles, which is what I do on my website, ne-knits.com. Squarespace's design intelligence empowers anyone to build a beautiful, more personalized website tailored to their unique business needs. With the Squarespace site, you can easily integrate your social media pages, such as your Instagram and YouTube, directly to your website with just a few clicks. If you're interested in creating your own Squarespace site, head to squarespace.com to start a free trial today. Once you're ready to launch your website, head to squarespace.com/neknits and use the code neknits to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video, and now let's get into the rest of the podcast. It's good to be filming another podcast. It has been 2 weeks since I filmed the last one. I know I promised last time I filmed that I would have a Greater Boston Yarn Crawl video to share with you all in between podcasts, but unfortunately things did not go as planned. I caught a cold last weekend. I had started the yarn crawl on Thursday and Friday, and then Saturday I just woke up and knew that I was not going to be able to finish the yarn crawl. So I don't have a dedicated yarn crawl video for you all, unfortunately. I only made it to 3 different stores, but the 3 stores that I made it to was really fun to visit. I did get some clips, so I'm actually going to put those clips at the end of today's video if you are all interested. And yeah, so that's what happened with the yarn crawl last week. But we're here today. I have a lot of projects to share as usual. I think because I had some downtime from feeling under the weather, I was able to get more things knitted. And I also felt inspired to cast on a few projects that I've had on my queue. So yeah, first we'll start with what I'm wearing, which is a finished object. This is the Totally Tubular Turtle Tank by Park Williams of Park and Knit. Now this tank top / slipover vest was like such a nice palette cleanser project for me. I had cast it on just a few weeks ago. Now this is knit at a bulky weight gauge, so the recommended needle size is 6.5mm needles, which if you're familiar with my projects, I don't really knit at that gauge very often. I tend to knit with more like DK weight gauges, like 4.5mm needles. This is considered a bulky weight knit as the gauge for the pattern is 14 stitches per 4 inches. So it's a very quick knit, and because it's all stockinette, it was just something like quick and easy that I could cast on, get through in less than 2 weeks, and be able to wear it today. Now this Totally Tubular Turtle Tank is called the Totally Tubular Turtle Tank because the suggested yarn is a tubular chainette style yarn from Knit Picks Wonder Fluff, which is a chainette sort of nylon netting that is filled with Surrey alpaca to create a very lofty, fluffy yarn. So I didn't use that exact yarn for my project. I use a very similar yarn, which is Sorella Yarns Surrey DK. This was gifted to me as part of the Eras collection pre-order, and this is in the color Blank Space, which is this really fun, bright kind of limey green color. Definitely something I don't normally gravitate towards, but I really am enjoying it. It's just such a fun pop of color that I think because it's unique in my own color palette that I am like excited to wear it and to have it. So this yarn is a very similar construction to the Knit Picks Wonder Fluff, if not the same. It's got the tube of recycled nylon filled with alpaca wool, and there is, yeah, so there's some alpaca and some wool. So it's 70% Surrey alpaca, 23% wool, and then 7% recycled nylon. And this is a 100 gram skein, and there's 284 yards in this 100 gram skein. It's very lightweight, it's very fluffy. You might be able to see some of the fibers coming off of it a little bit. As with any sort of fluffy yarn, it does shed a little bit when you're knitting with it and when you're wearing it, but it's nothing that I find is a deterrent from using the yarn. I think that's just something that happens with any sort of fluffy yarn, whether it's mohair, Surrey lace alpaca, or this blown chainette yarn. So it's called a totally tubular tank as well because Park Williams styles it more as a tank top. I kind of knew I wanted to wear it more as a slip over. You can see I have just a plain long sleeve t-shirt underneath, which is kind of how I always intend to wear it. I don't really see a time where I would want to wear this like Surrey alpaca tank top without long sleeves. I just feel like the contrast of having bare arms and then like a really warm fabric on my body is just something I wouldn't really want to wear. So I kind of went into it knowing I wanted to wear it as a slip over, which kind of gave me some flexibility with size because I didn't really mind if it was going to be like loose around my underarm. Like I wasn't worried about bra straps showing and such just because I kind of knew I was going to style it like this. However, the pattern itself, it does have a pretty wide range of suggested ease, ranging from -4 inches to +2 inches of ease. In the sample photos, Park is wearing hers with -2 inches of ease, and that was a look that I kind of liked. I like how it fit her, so I kind of wanted to go for a similar amount of ease with mine, which would be, -2 inches of ease. So this project was kind of like an impulsive cast on for me. I just wanted like a serotonin boost. I didn't really want to do much planning. I did not want to gauge swatch, so I just cast on with the suggested needle size in the pattern, which was 6.5mm needles. Now I just know from my history of knitting that most of the time, if I use the suggested needle size for a pattern, I always have a tighter gauge than what the designer gets. I think I'm just a tight knitter. So that kind of worked in my favor because knowing I wanted negative ease, I was kind of in between sizes 1 and 2 for this project, or extra small and small. I don't remember how exactly they're labeled, but between the first 2 sizes, if I had knit the very first size to the pattern gauge, it would have given me -3 inches of ease. And if I knit the second size in the pattern to gauge, it would give me +2 inches of ease. And knowing that I'm a tight knitter, I didn't want to knit the very first size, knowing that I would have an even smaller circumference, and that would be even more than -3 inches of ease, which was going to be not really what I wanted based on knowing the ease in the sample photo. So I picked the second size for myself, knowing I would be knitting tighter and it would give me less than the ease that the final measurements would be. And all in all, I think it worked out pretty well. I guess I'm skipping ahead, but my final circumference for this tank is -1 inch of ease on me, so it has a 33-inch circumference total, and it's exactly the fit that I wanted. So I'm glad I could get that without gauge swatching at all. And I do really like the fabric that this created with the 6.5mm needles. Knitting this project was super fun. I love the construction. It was like the same as the mini mock neck tank. So if you've knit the mini mock neck tank, this is like the same thing. It's just a winter version with a turtleneck rather than a mock neck. I love how you do the slip stitch edges at the same time for the armhole, so when you're done you don't go back and pick up the armholes at all. They're already done. The underarm is a little bit unfinished because you do just cast on at the underarm with backwards loop cast on, and because you don't go back and pick it up, they are just like raw kind of backwards loop cast on edges, which if I was being picky and if I had like maybe thought when I was casting on for the underarm, I would have picked like a more neat looking cast on, like a cable cast on, or maybe I would go back with a crochet hook and slip stitch some edging there to look a little bit more professional, but I wasn't really in the mood for that, and I think it looks fine, and most of the time my arms are down and you can't really see it, but that's just something to note. It doesn't have the ribbing that the mini mock neck tank has underneath the arms. And I did knit this to the suggested length, which for my size, the body length is about 7 inches long or 7.5 inches long, and then I did the suggested ribbing length, which is about 3.5 inches long. It is a split hem, so you do separate the front and back halves and work that ribbing flat, and I really love the split hem look. It just adds to kind of like the, I don't know, the whole casual style of this tank top. I just think it's a great pairing with the chunky turtleneck, the like sleeveless look, and then a split hem. It's just really nice. For the turtleneck collar, you do go back and pick up with a 16-inch circular needle, and you just do 1 by 1 ribbing with your yarn. And I think I knit my collar about 2 inches less than the suggested length of the collar. I don't really love my turtlenecks to be like all the way up to my chin. I also think I have a short neck in proportion to, I don't know, standard neck lengths, because I feel like anytime I knit like a tall collar to the suggested length, it's always like over my chin. So I wanted it to lay how it's laying now, so by eliminating a few inches on the collar, I was able to get just that. Trying on turtleneck collars, I think, is the best way to figure out if the length is what you want it to be. It is a little tedious because you do have to pretty much take the full length of the collar and put it on either waste yarn or like a tube, barber cord, or like try it on tubing, and then put it on, fold the collar, see how it looks, take it off, put the stitches back on the needles, and then keep knitting. So I did that a few times to make sure that the collar length was exactly where I wanted it, and I'm really happy with it. I'm also happy with the circumference of the collar. It's not really tight and suffocating on my neck. I also made sure to stretch out this ribbing while blocking this tank top. I did pin it out a little bit wider than it was naturally laying, just so it could have a little bit more breathing room around my neck, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. I think that's all I can say about the Totally Tubular Turtle Tank. I would recommend the pattern. It definitely was easy to follow. I think Park Williams' writing style is very beginner friendly, but it's also not too wordy, where if you're not a beginner and if you get overwhelmed by lots of words on a page, it's not really that either. It's just kind of like a perfect, it's like a well-written pattern that's good for a variety of different skill levels. This was a super quick knit, so if you need something that's like refreshing and doesn't take a lot of yarn, I definitely would recommend this. For my vest here, I only used 1.5 skeins of the Surrey DK, so less than 150 grams, which leads me to saying that I have 150 grams left of this yarn. I would love to give it away. This was gifted to me, and I would love to pass it on to someone else who wants to use it. So if you are interested in this yarn, 150 grams of Sorella Yarn Surrey DK in blank space, just put a comment below that you would like it, and I'll pick a random winner and send it to you after the next podcast. So if you make a similar size vest to mine here, I think you could use up all the yarn. This obviously could be used for a variety of different things. Would make a really soft scarf or shawl. Something else for the neck would be really nice. Like, this is really soft. I did also get some questions on Instagram if this was itchy or not. I don't find this itchy one bit, which is funny because I find alpaca blended yarns are itchy for me. However, Surrey alpaca, I never have any issues with. So this, I do not feel it on my neck. I don't have any itchiness at all. It's so comfortable. So this would be great for a neck accessory, maybe one of those collars, like the ones that Petite Knit or Sari Nordland have designed that just go under your coats. So yeah, lots of options here. Let me know if you want this yarn, and I would love to give it away to you. I have another finished object to share today, and that is a secret test knit that is no longer a secret, so I can share it on the podcast. So you've never seen these before, but this is the Cassandra Sock, or the Cassandra Socks. I only have one because I only knit one for the test knit and just have not had time to make the other one yet. But this is a pattern by Laura McLean of Sunday Morning Knits on Instagram and on YouTube. And it's a free pattern, and it's just this beautiful pair of cabled socks. You can see it has the one braided cable going down the middle and the center, and it also has faux cables that go down the side as well. So it's a top down or cuff down sock. It features a folded cuff, which is really fun here, so all stockinette. And then you have the cable pattern that extends down the foot of the sock, and you use 2 contrasting colors. You use one for the cuff and the heel, and then a second contrast color for the toe. And I used a woolberry yarn for my socks here. So this is the main color. I used Hummingbird Hiney from the Caboose collection. It's this beautiful sort of multicolored pink yarn. This, I think, is the Berry Cozy Sock base, which is an 80/20 superwash merino nylon blend, a 2-ply sock yarn. And for the cuffs and the heel, I used this yarn. I think this is a Sorella Mini. I lost track of the label, or if I don't even know if it ever had a label, but it's a Also 80/20 2-ply sock yarn in a very light peachy color. And then the other contrast color was the other part of the Woolberry Hummingbird Hiney sock set. So I don't know the color name of this either, but it's like this yellowy green color. So these are the yarns that I used for the sock. And yeah, I really love how it came out. It was fun to test knit. I actually helped out doing the left-handed cable chart pattern for this. So if you are a left-handed knitter, the pattern should have left-handed directions, which I think is always helpful and not often found in patterns. It is a free pattern. I think I mentioned that before. If I didn't mention it, it is free. So I think that's also awesome. It's a very fall kind of like cozy sock. I knit mine a little bit longer than I make my socks normally, so it would make a great house sock or just a really nice kind of wintry sock. I love the cables. They weren't too difficult to make. When I cable with socks, I use a toothpick as my cable needle. I would like to be able to cable without a cable needle on socks, but I find that my tension is just too tight and the yarn is just too small, where they just like, I don't know, I can't do it as easily as with bigger yarn at a larger gauge. So a toothpick helps me out with the cables, and it has just a classic wedge toe at the end, stockinette at the bottom of the foot, and yeah, that's the sock. It's a cute one. Definitely would recommend it if you're looking for like a cozy, more in-depth sock pattern to knit rather than a stockinette sock. Moving on now to my works in progress. I'm really excited to share this work in progress because I've been wanting to get this back on the needles, and it is my Aurelia Pullover. The Aurelia Pullover is a pattern by Sari Nordland. It's a top-down raglan with all over cables and texture and bobbles, and it's a very involved knit. It's a DK weight sweater, and I started mine last year with Sorella Yarns Classic DK in the color Folklore, which I have here, this really nice pale purple gray color. And the Classic DK is a 100% superwash merino yarn, and it's really soft to work with. I've been really enjoying knitting with it. So I had the Aurelia on my needles for last winter, and then I kind of put it on in hibernation through the spring and the summer, and now it's time to pick it back up. I will say this is definitely a more involved knit, and that's one of the main reasons why I put it away for a while. It was just like a lot of knitting work for me, and I think I'm starting to learn that as much as I love these textured patterns, like I talk about Sari Nordland patterns all the time, but I can not often finish them just because they take up so much time. I think my lifestyle is more suited to knitting stockinette just because I'm able to multitask while knitting stockinette, and the amount of time that I have to sit down and work on something that needs my full attention is just so much more limited. So anything with texture, color work, just something where I need full attention, it always takes me way longer to complete rather than stockinette projects. But I love this sweater. It just looks so good, and it's something I really want to wear come the winter time. So I wanted to get it back on the needles so I could finish it before the winter. And I was able to finish the first sleeve, which is very exciting because last time you saw this, the sleeve was close to being finished. I think I added like this much knitting, so like from here to here. So I only had a few more repeats of the cable pattern to go, and then I did the cuff in twisted rib. So here is the full sleeve detail here. You can see there is a lot of cabling going on. The one benefit of the sleeve are there are no bobbles, whereas the body has bobbles, so a little bit faster there. I was knitting with this on a 9-inch circular needle because I thought that would help me with the cables and make it a little bit faster than magic loop, but I quickly realized that I did not prefer the 9-inch circular over the magic loop method. So I'm glad I finished off this sleeve, and when I do the next one, I'm gonna do magic loop, which is how I had started this sleeve. This is going back, so if you remember this, thank you for remembering, but if you don't remember this, I don't blame you. But I had started this sleeve with magic loop, had complained about it being too fiddly because I was alternating skeins, doing the cables, magic loop, so I was like, oh, if I do 9-inch circulars, that'll take out one sort of extra step out of the process and make it smoother. So I did that. At some point I switched to 9-inch circulars. I don't really know at what point on the sleeve I did. I had gotten warnings that my gauge might change significantly by switching needle methods, but I don't see a major difference, so that's good. So this is half magic loop, half 9-inch circular, and I'm just gonna do the whole second sleeve with magic loop. So finishing this first sleeve is definitely giving me the motivation to start the second sleeve. I have been applying my new knowledge of cabling without a cable needle for this sweater, so I'm excited to do that for the sleeve. I finished this sleeve without any cable needle, which I'm very proud of, and it definitely helped it go by a little bit faster, so I'm going to be doing that for this one as well. I am going to alternate skeins throughout the sleeve just to make sure that I don't have any color blocking. I did save the yarn that I used for the body here because this is a raglan. The yarn that was in the body was also here in the sleeve, so I have a little bit more of that skein that I will continue with, alternate it in with a new skein so that way there's no harsh line with the raglan sleeve separation. Aurelia's almost done. Really happy about this one. It feels really nice. I am curious how this is going to block. It is a 100% superwash yarn sweater, and I am knitting this a little bit tighter than I would want it to fit when it's done intentionally. So if I try this on, it definitely feels really tight in a way that I wouldn't want to style it, but knowing that it's superwash and it's going to grow a bit with blocking, I think it's going to grow into something that is a little bit looser fitting and definitely more the style that I'm looking for with the finished fit of this sweater. So I'll keep you all posted on the superwash nature of this sweater. I really haven't knit too many sweaters with 100% superwash yarn. I think the only other one that I've finished and worn is my stick season sweater, which I knit out of Fuzzy Peach Fibers 100% superwash DK weight yarn, and I finished that at the end of last spring, like when it was too warm to wear it, and it's just getting cool enough to start to wear that sweater now. And I didn't find any issues with blocking that one, but I know people say that sometimes superwash sweaters, they grow with wearing them too, so I'll keep you guys posted. But I really don't have a lot of experience with long-term wearing of superwash sweaters, so I am curious to see how this one holds up and hopefully nothing major happens. I have heard that a good solution to stretched out superwash sweaters is to block them again and then throw them in the dryer for like a little bit, which I know is like the big no-no for wool sweaters, but because it's superwash, the heat helps it bring it back, I've heard. So we'll see what happens with this sweater, but I'm really happy with it so far, and I think it'll be okay after blocking. My next project is the Velvet Mirror Cowl by Andrea Mowry. So this is a colorwork cowl, and here is my progress so far. So it's gotten a few inches of work. Like I said before, this is like similar line of thought where it's color work, it needs like my full attention, so I don't really have a lot of opportunities to work on these types of projects. So this will also kind of be like a slow growing project, but it's been really fun so far. The Velvet Mirror Cowl is a tube that you knit color work and then you give it a twist before you Kitchener together the two ends to create the twisted cowl. I really like cowls. I feel like they're very practical to wear in the winter because I will always want like extra warmth around my neck, but sometimes a full scarf where you have to figure out the things with the ends and a coat and all that, it's sometimes too much hassle, whereas a cowl is just really simple to throw on. It gives you that warmth and you don't have to fuss around with scarf tying or ends and stuff like that. So the yarn that I'm using for my Velvet Mirror Cowl is a Spin Cycle yarn. This is Spin Cycle dyed in the wool, and this is in the color Nostalgia, which is mostly dark red, kind of like a maroon color with a little bit of blue in there as well. And I'm using a undyed Surrey alpaca yarn from Birch and Lily. It's their old discontinued Surrey base, so this one is very fuzzy, which I am finding while knitting this. This is a silk and Surrey blend. Holding it double per the pattern. The pattern suggestion for yarns is also a Surrey yarn held double with the Spin Cycle dyed in the wool. And I think the suggested needle size is 3.5mm needles, and I am using 4.5. Maybe the suggested needle size is 4mm needles. I know I went up like 1 or 2 sizes just because my color work tends to be a little bit tighter, and once again I'm a tight knitter in general, so for me it never hurts to go up a needle size. And also because this is a cowl, gauge isn't super important. So I just decided to cast on with 4.5. And I'm using a 16-inch circular needle, which makes it very easy. It's like the perfect size for this diameter cowl. So right now in the pattern, the white Surrey is the dominant color, where the spin cycle is the non-dominant color, and I am holding my yarns accordingly to do that. Now, because this Surrey yarn is so fuzzy, I'm finding it is really overshadowing the spin cycle, so it's really hard to see the spin cycle colors, and I hope that that kind of goes away in the second half of the cowl. This is called velvet mirror because you do the first motif with one color dominant and the other color not, and then you switch it. You switch your dominant color, as well as like in the color work chart, the spin cycle after the second half will be these like thick portions here, and then the white Surrey will sort of be the background. So I'm hoping that when that happens, the fuzziness won't be as in the way as it is right now. Regardless, I am okay with it. This is yarn that I had in stash left over. In fact, I had like the perfect quantity for this project, so it was something I'm excited to like use up something in my stash for and not buy new for. But if I were to do this project again, and if I were shopping for yarn, I would go for something that's a little bit less fuzzy, and you can just see like all of the hairs coming off of it, like something that's a little bit thinner. I know this was like the Surrey alpaca that has 328 yards per 50 grams, and there are Surrey laces out there that have like over 400 yards per 50 grams, and I think those ones are thinner and less fuzzy, and that kind of base might have given me less of an issue with overpowering the spin cycle. I am having fun with this. It is sort of stretching my brain a bit to do the color work because, like I said before, I don't do color work a lot, and it's slower. You have to take your time and making sure the tension is good. But I think something like a cowl is a great introductory color work type of pattern if you want to get into it, but are worried about things like fit and stuff like that, and gauge, because this doesn't really have a huge dependency on gauge or fit. It's a great way to sort of experiment, and I am catching my longer floats in the back here, but I think because this ends up getting like stitched clothes, I don't even know if catching floats is necessary, because there's going to be no risk of ever like snagging a float because it's going to be all stitched up inside. But definitely would recommend if you want to try some color work but maybe are a little bit nervous about gauge or stuff like that. This is a great one where you don't really have to worry too much, and it's really fun to see the pattern grow. I was hoping to see the color shift a little bit more. Like I said before, the fuzziness is kind of overpowering it, but also I think that when I wound up the spin cycle, it's not as contrasting as I was hoping it would be. Let me grab the skein. So this is the skein, and I'm just not too familiar with spin cycle yarns. Like, I don't really buy them that often, so maybe I should have known this with this colorway, that it doesn't have a lot of contrast, so the striping is not super intense. And I was surprised that when I wound it up, like, I feel like the color stops after the blue, and then there is so much just of this like solid dark red. I was hoping of more color shifting, but maybe I should have just gotten a skein that had a lot more color differences. So that's something that might help you if you're shopping for spin cycle. I don't know. In hindsight, maybe I would have picked a different yarn that showed off the shifting a little bit more. And that's all I can say about my velvet mirror cowl. Next up is my Amy sweater by Petite Knit, which I have been steadily working on. The Amy sweater is a top-down raglan. It features 2x2 rib details and some rolled edges. It's mostly stockinette, and it's a little bit oversized. The suggested amount of ease is about 8 inches. I am knitting for myself size extra small, which should give me about 7 inches of positive ease. I wasn't really up for the full 8 inches. I feel like 7 inches is plenty. I am knitting my Amy sweater with the suggested yarn, which is Sandnesgarn Pure Gint. Sandnesgarn Pure Gint is a 100% Norwegian wool yarn, and it's a DK weight yarn, but it's a pretty heavy DK weight yarn, so there's 91 meters per 50 grams. It's definitely a little bit rustic. I have been loving knitting with it. Like, it feels really nice on the needles. Holding it just single-stranded, so the stitch definition is really nice. And this color, Cocoa Nibs, is just like the perfect chocolatey brown. So you can see here, I finished the collar, which I was really eager to do. I had split for sleeves, was working on the body, and when I ran out of yarn and a ball, I just decided to go ahead and do the collar. This raglan sweater, you start by knitting flat and then you just go straight into the body, so you don't do the collar first, so the collar has to be picked up at the end. So I picked up the suggested amount of stitches with a 16-inch circular needle. I'm using 4.5mm needles for the body, and I used 4mm needles for the collar, and I love how it turned out. It was definitely a lot of knitting. So I did knit mine shorter than the length provided in the pattern. Again, my short neck, I wanted a shorter collar. I also didn't want it coming right up to my chin. So my collar here is about 6.5 inches long, which is about 1.5 inches shorter than the pattern length. So it didn't make a huge difference when folding it. Again, kind of like how I did with the turtle tank, I had to try it on a bunch of times to really see how it was going to fold and lay once I cast off. So you do a little German short row before doing the stockinette rolled edges, and I really like the stockinette rolled edge. I think it looks really good, and I'm excited to block this out because I know that the ribbing is going to open up a bit and look a little bit more flat rather than cinched in like this, and I think it's going to be a really nice turtleneck sweater. This is definitely the it's not winter yet. This is definitely the fall season of turtlenecks. Like, I feel like every pattern I'm knitting has some sort of like tall collar, and I'm looking at new patterns and I'm like, oh, that's nice, and it has a turtleneck. So it's definitely a trend for me this year. Since doing the collar, there's really nothing else too fancy to talk about. I am just working on the body and stockinette. We'll probably go ahead and do the sleeves before I finish the body at some point. I am spit splicing my yarn once I get to the end of a yarn ball. This yarn spit splices pretty easily. I do use water and not my spit because I just feel like it's a little gross, but just saying, there are a lot of ends to weave in with Peer Gynt because they only come in 50-gram balls. So I'm glad that I can spit splice and just keep knitting. So I think I only had like 2 ends to weave in so far, which was just from the cast on edge and when I cast off for the collar. So yeah, it's going pretty well. I did mention last podcast that this yarn feels like it's going to soften up a lot with blocking. I did a gauge swatch that I blocked, and I can already tell, like, knitting and feeling this fabric that hasn't been blocked compared to the block gauge swatch. It feels so much different. The gauge swatch feels a lot softer. People have said that Peer Gynt softens up greatly with washing, and it's just a really hardy wool. I've even read comments online that people who use Peer Gynt, they say these sweaters last for decades. Like, it's so good wearing and doesn't pill that much. So I'm excited to see how the Peer Gynt wears. I know some people think it's a little scratchy. I think it's going to be fine for me. Again, based on the blocked gauge swatch, I didn't really have any issues when holding it to my neck for an extended period of time. So that would really open up a lot of possibilities for knitting with Peer Gynt in the future. I feel like I love the way it gives really good stitch definition. It feels very thick and warm, and there's so many good colors, and it's one of the cheaper Sandusgarn yarns, so benefits all around. Quick project update on my Musselburgh hat. It's been coming along. It's stockinette. I've been bringing this on the go with me a lot. I spent a lot of time this past weekend in the city, like sitting on the T and stuff, so there was a lot of knitting time, and this is how it's coming along. The Musselburgh is a pattern by Isolde Teague. It's a beanie pattern that is swatchless, so you can just cast on with any yarn. You measure your gauge once you've knit a few inches of the crown, and then you follow the chart in the pattern to tell you how many stitches to increase to. It's knit from crown to crown, so you end up folding it in on itself to make a double layered hat that, depending on how long you make it, it can have a folded brim. It doesn't have to have a folded brim. So it's a really good pattern. If you haven't heard of it, I definitely recommend it. This is my second Musselburgh hat that I've knit. The yarn that I'm using is from Ruby and Roses. This is their soft rose base, which is a 85% superwash merino, 15% nylon yarn, fingering weight. This is the color Invisible String, which is a beautiful sort of hodgepodge of so many different like speckled colors, like green, blue. It's like a purpley gray base, and there's just so much color in here. There's like pink, yellow, purple, blue-green. Yeah, it's knitting up really nicely. Like, I really love how all of the speckles are knitting. There's really not a lot of like pooling or spiraling. I mean, there's like a little bit, but nothing crazy intense. And it's just a really fun fabric to see grow and get knit up in this stockinette. It's just a really fun variegated yarn. So I've been having a lot of fun knitting this. It's been a great on-the-go project. I am knitting mine with size 3.25 millimeter needles. This is a 16-inch circular, and this is giving me a gauge of about 6.5 stitches per inch. So according to the size chart that was on there, I did have issues once when I cast on my first Musselburgh hat. I think I used like 2.5 millimeter needles, or maybe 2.75 millimeter needles. My gauge was so tight that it wasn't even on the chart for the Musselburgh pattern, so I like had to pick another needle size, which was funny because it was like I cast on, I got through the crown, I was like, oh, time to pick my size, then it wasn't even there, so that was disappointing. So that's what I'm working with here. The fabric is pretty dense, and it's definitely going to be a well-wearing beanie once the fabric is doubled up. I wore my other Musselburgh hat last winter all the time because I find that the stockinette fabric really molds to your head in a way that other hats just don't. So I found it very comfortable. It's funny because my other Musselburgh is also like a highly variegated color, and I want one in just like a solid, like more neutral color to pair with more outfits, like if I want to look more sophisticated. But here I am knitting this that, I mean, I love it, but it certainly isn't the sophisticated chic vibe that a solid color beanie would do. So maybe I'll cast on another one in a solid when I'm done with this. My last two projects to share are new cast-ons. My first one is really fun. It's really seasonal, and these are my spooky socks. I'm calling them my spooky socks because they are Halloween themed, and I got this Halloween sock wool from Hobbii. Hobbii has a few Halloween themed self-striping sock yarns. This is color number 3, so it's called Spooky Socks on the website, which is why I'm calling my socks Spooky Socks. And it just has all these fun colors of orange, purple, and black. And this is a fingering weight yarn, 75% wool, 25% polyamide. 100 grams should give me more than enough to make a pair of socks for myself. If I really wanted to, could probably make 2 pairs of socks for myself with this. It was like less than $10, so it was like a no-brainer, kind of like, oh, I want something seasonal and fun and quirky, and yeah. So I just started a regular vanilla sock with size US 1 2.25 millimeter needles. I did a 2x2 ribbed cuff. I cast on 64 stitches and did 20 rounds for the cuff, and then just went into stockinette. You can see the self-striping there. Really fun. I really like the big blocks of stripes. And for the heel, I'm using a contrast color that I had in stash, which I just thought was the perfect green to put with this because it's very Halloween-y. This is from Honey and Quill, and I actually got it from a Christmas sock set that I got from them last year, and I ended up getting 2 minis. One was red, one was green, and I liked the red more for the Christmas socks, and I just had this green in stash. And I've always wondered, I was like, it's kind of like a unique green that I don't really see myself using very often in socks, but perfect fit for my spooky socks. I did just start the heel flap for my heel flap and gusset. So it's just a basic top down, cuff down vanilla sock. I am going to incorporate some fit things that I learned from my custom fit socks book that I do better with a shorter heel flap. And so that's what I'm going to do. I did cast on 64 stitches because that gives me a good sort of tight hugging circumference around my foot that I like. And I find that I liked my socks tighter with less stitches. Like, I used to knit socks with 60 stitches on the needles, but I found out the reason I like that was because my heel flap was tighter. And then after doing the custom fit socks book, which actually, let me pull out, I haven't talked about this in a while, so in case you're new here, I had a few episodes where I was talking about this book, Custom Fit Socks by Kate Atherley, and this book goes all the way through, like, you take a bunch of measurements of your foot, and then it has a bunch of calculations and math formulas in here to use those measurements to create your own perfect sock formula. assuming that you want to do a cuff down heel flap and gusset sock. So I did that. It was a fun experiment. The pair of socks that I made were nice. I think the one thing I didn't love about those socks was that they still felt a little bit loose because this goes off of a 10% negative ease factor. And I think I just personally like more, like 20 to 25% negative ease on my socks. So kind of using that, I'm building my own custom sock formula for a vanilla sock, and I'm just going to make sure that my heel flap is shorter than what's normally recommended in vanilla sock patterns, and I find that 64 stitch circumferences are good for my size foot. So this has just been really fun to have on the needles because it's a vanilla sock. It's pretty mindless, just knitting on it. Of course, the self-striping is really fun. The Hobie sock wool is definitely not super soft. If anything, maybe it feels a little bit scratchy, but it definitely feels sturdy, which is good. I think there's like this funny contrast with knitting where we want the yarns to be soft, but when the yarns are soft, they're not as strong more often than not. So I feel like when I say that something is not soft, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing, because I think that maybe for a sock especially, having a rougher wool will probably be a little bit tougher and hold up longer than if I had like a super soft yarn that might just disintegrate in the wind one day because it's so soft. So my spooky socks, I think I have well enough time to finish these before Halloween. It would be great to wear them on Halloween. So here's my little October seasonal project. And my last project to share is also a new cast on. I know, if you're wondering, wow, she has a lot of projects on the needles. Yes, I do. There's something about a start of a new season where I just get so excited about everything I have planned for the season, and I want to knit them all at the same time. So I just cast everything on, which might not be the best decision, but I did cast on another project from my fall knitting plans, and that is the Vivienne Pullover by Sari Nordland. And I'm hoping the light will cooperate. I wonder what the best way is to show this. What if I hold like something dark behind it? Oh yeah, that'll show it better. So the Vivienne Pullover, I'll put a picture on the screen, is a pattern by Sari Nordland. It has cables and texture. It's a top-down drop shoulder pattern knit with a sport weight yarn. I am using the suggested yarn. I'm using Durarum Natura Ulysse, which is here, in the color Merlot, which is this dark burgundy color. It has kind of like a multicolor effect of like some black and red, and this is a 100% wool yarn. I'm pretty sure it's a woolen spun yarn, so it's very lofty and very light while being plump. It's one of those yarns that really transforms with blocking. This yarn I've been wanting to try for a while, and I've been really enjoying knitting with it so far. So I cast on last week, and because it's a drop shoulder, you start with the back panel first, and sorry I have to hold this behind it, but I really think it's the best way to see it. You cast on and then you do increases as you go through the chart. Now this is all charted. There is honeycomb stitch in the middle, and I've started to get through the first couple of cables on the side. There are horseshoe cables here, and a little bit more texture that is just starting to build as I increase out. This is definitely a slow going project. I'm using 4mm needles to get gauge. The suggested needle size I think is 3.5, and I'm making the second size for myself, which is the suggested size for my full bust circumference measurement. I am doing this without a cable needle, which is really fun. The honeycomb stitch is definitely the slowest part of this pattern. These are all just 1-and-1 cables that go back and forth across this whole stretch of stitches, and it's definitely slow. I'm doing it without a cable needle, but still, it takes a lot of concentration. It also doesn't help that I've been knitting this at night in the dark with this yarn. Oh, not easy. I really should try working on this in the daylight, or maybe like with a lamp behind me. And there were a few times where I messed up and had these going in the wrong direction, and I did have to tink back and fix those just because it made the whole thing look a little weird, even though it was just a few stitches that I had missed. So the honeycomb part is a lot of work, but I think it's going to be well worth it in the end. And I'm glad these cables on the side here, they're pretty irregular or infrequent. Like, they don't happen every single row. They happen like a wide stretch of rows. So it's been a good project. Obviously, it takes a lot of concentration. I kind of wanted to get into this more, but part of me wants to finish my Aurelia Pullover first before getting into this one, just so I don't have two like almost finished cabled sweaters. You know, I kind of want to finish one, move on from that, and then focus on this one. And probably it'll be like my practice to have like one cabled or complicated pattern on the needles at a time, where everything else is more like stockinette or a little bit less involved. Beginnings of my Vivienne Pullover, and yeah, that's the last project I have to share about. Some upcoming events and stuff. Rhinebeck is coming up, so that'll be fun. I am planning on going. I've never been before, so I'm really excited to go. I am planning on going on Friday and Saturday. So for Friday, I do have tickets to the Cake Palooza event as well as Indie Untangled. And on Saturday, I have a ticket to the New York Sheep and Wool Festival. So if you're going, would love to say hi. I know one thing I have not been doing that a lot of people will do is make like a dedicated Rhinebeck sweater. I didn't really do that this year. I was just thinking that something that I had finished recently, I would definitely wear and maybe call it my Rhinebeck sweater. Like I could wear this to Rhinebeck. If I finish my Amy sweater in time, I would love to wear that there. Of course, we'll have to see how the weather is, and hopefully it's cool enough for sweaters, but you know, not too cold or not too rainy, but we'll see. I'm excited to go. I'll be driving up, and yeah, definitely going to be a lot of fun. We'll definitely take some video footage there to share with you all when I get back. I do also want to share about an exciting make-along that is happening soon, and that is the Adventures of Life make-along hosted by Originally Lovely. You guys know I am an affiliate with Originally Lovely, and they have put together a really fun package of patterns for the fall season. Most of them are knitting patterns. There is one crochet pattern that I'll use Originally Lovely yarn, and the whole purpose of the make-along is to just enjoy the adventures of life, you know, the small things in life, going stitch by stitch and just making memories and joining community while you all make similar projects. So I don't have any official part of like hosting the make along, but it does look like a really fun event. I am considering getting a kit with one of the projects to cast on. Haven't decided yet, but I did just want to share that that is out. If you're interested in more details, you can check out Originally Lovely's website. You can do any of the patterns for the make along. You don't have to use their yarn, but if you do want to use their yarn, they are doing a 25% off discount on kits this week that I think ends pretty soon by the time you're watching this video. So I'll link below my affiliate link if you're interested in shopping, and definitely check that out if you're interested in any of these patterns for the fall. That does bring me to the end of the podcast today. Like I mentioned before, I'm gonna put my Boston Yarn Crawl vlog clips at the end of this video right now, so if you want to keep watching, go ahead. The vlog doesn't really have a good outro because I just kind of stopped going. So take it as you will. Thank you for joining me today. Feel free to follow me on Instagram if you want to see more of my projects at any_knits, or my website any-knits.com. I post videos here about once a week, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all in the next one. Thanks for joining. Bye. This weekend is the Greater Boston Yarn Crawl, and I'm going to take you along with me. Every year, a bunch of yarn shops all around Massachusetts participate in the Greater Boston Yarn Crawl. If you're unfamiliar with the concept of a yarn crawl, it's an event usually centered around a geographical location like a city or a state, and local yarn shops will participate. Sometimes they'll have prizes, they'll have specials going on at each store, and usually there is a passport involved where you're encouraged to go to as many yarn shops as you can, and you'll get a little stamp at each shop. Now, the Greater Boston Yarn Crawl covers a wide variety of yarn shops all around Massachusetts, and there are 14 shops participating as seen on this map, and I'm trying to get to as many as I can this weekend. It is a long weekend event, so it starts on Thursday and goes through Sunday. Today's Thursday evening. I just got off work, so I'm gonna try to hit my first 2 shops today. It's raining pretty hard tonight, so got my raincoat on. It's very fall here in Massachusetts this time of year, getting pretty chilly, although I think the rainstorm has brought in some humidity and heat. It's like 67 right now. But off to store number 1 for tonight, and that's going to be another yarn in Burlington. We made it. first stamp has been acquired. Happy Friday. Today is the second day of the Greater Boston Yarn Crawl. I just got off work Friday evening and gonna head out to another shop. So I only ended up going to one shop last night. It was pouring rain, the traffic was crazy, so it really didn't give me any time to go to two shops before they all closed. But we got some time today and I'm heading off to Sit and Knit in Melrose, which I've never been before, so really excited to check it out. All right, I just hopped off the T, gonna take a walk to Boston Fiber Company. So Boston Fiber Company is in the south end of Boston. I think it's definitely on the south side. I think specifically the south end. It's right near where the SoWa Market is. And I just took the orange line on the T to the Tufts Medical Center stop. And I'm walking, it's like a 10-11 minute walk from here. You can also take the red line down to Broadway and walk there. It's also like 10 minutes. So that's how I usually get to Boston Fiber Company. I personally am not fond of driving and parking in Boston. The driving's fine, the parking's usually just really expensive if you can't find a street spot. So yeah, walking there now.